If poker is gambling, why do the same players keep winning year after year? That's one of the famous questions in the hit movie Rounders. So that's the question most people never answer when they talk about this debate of whether or not poker is gambling. But first I want to establish, poker has luck, right? Anyone who's ever played and had their aces outdrawn by some bimbo knows that really all too well. But the presence of luck doesn't mean that something is gambling. You see, gambling is not the presence of luck. Gambling is the absence of skill. So a lot of things in life have luck. Sports, investing, business, life itself has an element of unknown, randomness, and luck. So the real question isn't whether poker has luck. It does. The question is whether skill can overcome that luck, because poker has enough skill for this edge to manifest. And in poker, the answer is definitively yes, and I'll show you that in this video. I'll show you why poker is different from other casino games, why the short-term variance and luck confuses people, and why this really matters for us as an industry and how it relates to your life as well. Stay right here. Hey, I'm Alec Torelli. I've been a professional poker player for over 20 years now. I also coach as well on consciouspoker.com. And when I'm asked by people like what I do, I tell them, I'm a professional poker player. And one of the most common responses I get, which I'm always really amused by, is they say like, "Oh, well, I can never do that. I don't gamble. I don't like to gamble." And I'm always like amused because I don't gamble either. In fact, I tell them, look, neither do I. I have my vices like everyone, and there's no judgment here, but risking money on unprofitable bets or things that I know nothing about, like table games, like roulette or baccarat or betting on sports, is not one of them. It's not something I enjoy at all. I've never enjoyed gambling. I've never really partaked in these activities, and I've never, for certainly much less, considered myself a gambler. So it's always amusing to me when this debate comes up. Recently, it kind of went viral on social media, and I think the crux of the debate is a lack of understanding of gambling. And I think it's really important that we clarify this and that we really understand the types of words that we use, because words shape our reality. And when we label something, that defines what that is. So for example, if there are people getting killed in another country and one person calls it a war and another person calls it a genocide, it's a very different meaning that you're giving to that activity, right? And so in poker, it's the same way with everything in life. That's a very harrowing example, but it also matters a lot in poker. And so it really matters when we say gambling. When someone says, "Oh, I'm a professional gambler," or "I gamble," that's really important because it's describing something that is very different than what a professional poker player actually does. So first, we should start with the definition of gambling so that people can we're all on the same page. And gambling literally means, according to the dictionary, this is just a dictionary definition, the activity of playing a game of chance for money. Okay, so that's what gambling is. So the question then, to decide specifically about poker or anything, of whether or not that activity is gambling, is this activity, is poker a game of chance, of luck, or is it a game of skill? And there's a couple things we need to establish before we move forward. The first is that if poker is a game of luck, you cannot be a long-term winner. Nobody can win long-term in a game that contains only luck. So for example, if two people flip a coin and it's a fair coin toss, eventually they will each win 50% of the time, because coin tosses have no luck and the probability of getting heads or tails is exactly 50-50. So being a long-term winner is not possible in games containing luck. And games of skill, on the other hand, therefore, if a game has skill, it is not gambling, right? Because gambling is not the presence of luck. Gambling is the absence of skill. So that is our roadmap, and now that we're on the same page, we need to understand whether or not poker has skill, and if it has more skill than luck. Because if it does, it is, of course, not gambling. So the only way to do that is to establish what we said, is to answer the question definitively, are there long-term winners? Now, fortunately, we have very conclusive proof about this, and there's a very fair system to decide this, and that's basically that people play millions of hands of online poker. So they play a large enough sample to have their results be related to their ability to make decisions. Because if you play 10 hands, of course, anyone could win in a short sample. But over millions of hands, of course, it is a large enough sample to determine whether or not someone is consistently winning, because the sample size is so large. So imagine a million coin tosses. If it was heads 80% of the time, you could just be pretty sure that this coin toss is likely to be 80% heads. It's called the law of large numbers, and it basically says that the larger the sample, the more likely that the outcome will be related to the expected outcome. And so in poker, we fortunately have millions of hands of sample sizes, and we have thousands of examples of these because there are independent third parties that track all of the online play, and they track these screen names and they track their results. There's also players that track this. It's actually extremely common in online poker. Basically, every serious player tracks all of their results, and these are third-party systems that you input all the data, and it tells you how much money you're winning or losing. It tells you thousands of other things as well, but this is the main thing that it tells you. So here's a screenshot of one of the best online poker players in the world, frankly. They've played 1.2 million hands over 4 years, and you can see the green line here, they're up $7 million. There's other lines as well that are really impressive. The orange line basically says how much they're expected to win when they're all in. So when they decide to risk all their money, this is how much money they're expected to win. So this shows that they're consciously risking money with the best hand over time. The blue line represents how much money the player won when they revealed their cards. Basically saying that when they get to the end of the hand, they are getting there with the best hand more often than not. And the red line, which is also extremely impressive, is the money won when the cards are not revealed. So this shows they won about $1.5 million without revealing their cards, showing that they're outplaying their opponents by basically bluffing to get them to fold. So across the board, this player is basically all the lines are straight up to the right. The player's winning millions of dollars over millions of hands, which is a definitive measure of skill. There's thousands of examples of this. I just picked one, and you could contrast this with a coin flip of a million trials, a million trial coin flip. Here you could see in the beginning the line has a few subtle blue marks where it's moving up and down, but over time it converges to 50-50, where 50% of the time it's heads and 50% it's tails, because again, there's no skill in a coin toss. So the question is, how much of poker is luck and skill? And on any given day, poker has about 70% luck. Professionals win about 70% of their sessions if they're playing live poker. It's been estimated that poker has about 70% skill and 30% luck. Magic the Gathering, another famous card game, is similar to this. And a lot of things in life are similar to this. But this is where people get confused. So they mistakenly equate the existence of luck with gambling. They say, oh, well, poker, you could sit down and lose money, that's gambling. But again, gambling is not the presence of luck. Gambling is the absence of skill. Gambling is playing a game of chance for money, but poker is a game of skill with an element of chance. And I would argue that poker is only gambling, like many things, if you don't know what you're doing. Poker could be gambling if you're playing a game of chance for money. That's gambling. So if you are playing a game relying on luck because you don't know what you're doing, you've never played, you don't know the rules, and you're sitting with other people who do, you are gambling when you're playing poker. But me, a professional, a winning player, the player in the chart, or me, or thousands of other professionals around the world, are not gambling when they're sitting down at the poker table. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're taking calculated risks when the odds are in their favor, and they're only risking money when they have an edge, which is why they're up millions of dollars over time. But isn't this true of anything in life? I mean, you could say, well, that's I don't know, I don't believe that. But think about anything in life. Okay, let's look at investing. Ray Dalio, arguably the greatest investor of all time, pretty standard. He founded Bridgewater, billions of dollars, widely considered one of the greatest investors in the world. He has only won 54% positive months. So 54% of his months are positive and 46% are losing. Okay. And he only has 28 out of 32 profitable years. Now, poker players, I would say, have more than that. They frankly win more than 54% of their individual sessions, let alone over the course of a month. If they play every day, they're going to win more than 54%. And a lot of players I know have never had a losing year in poker. If they played for 32 years, they would have 32 winning years in a row. So poker arguably has less luck than investing, but nobody would consider Ray Dalio a gambler. He does lose sometimes, admittingly. He only wins 54% of the months, but he's not a gambler. He's an investor. Again, words matter. He is an investor. But someone else who has no idea how to invest in the stock market, and frankly, they are gambling in the stock market, they would leverage their account, punt it all on, a meme coin, or buy options, or, go max leverage long some trending investment, and then they would bust all their account and they lose all their money. In fact, you could argue that just like in poker, where a professional and a gambler can sit down at the same table, in fact, they could play against each other, you could argue that's the same thing in investing. Ray Dalio could be on one side of the trade as an investor with a knowledge of, where the stock is going to move, if it's going to go up or down. And the gambler could be on the other side of the trade, just buying what, he heard on the internet is the latest thing to buy. And Dalio could win at the expense of the a gambler that can lose. So there's really no difference between, this is just one example, there's no difference between this and pretty much anything else in life that has an element of luck or an element of randomness or an element of variance where there's probabilistic outcome and certain players win and other players lose. I mean, nobody would consider a professional investor to be a gambler, yet here we are just debating whether poker is gambling, and it basically operates under the exact same mechanism as investing. And so it's just a lack of awareness about the subject. I think a lot of it is frankly because poker is played inside a casino where all the other games, frankly, are games where you are gambling because you're playing against the house who always has an edge, which is, Vegas wasn't built on winners. That's why, the casinos make billions of dollars because they have an edge. But poker is played against other people. So doesn't matter. The house doesn't care who wins. They don't care if I win or you win or anyone wins. They take a cut out of every hand. All you have to do to be winning at poker is to be better than the other players. And of course, you could be better at the other players if you study the game or you just choose to sit in games where you have an edge, just like you can in investing. So the question is not whether or not poker has skill. It's kind of a loaded question. It's like saying, how much of a coin toss is luck? The question is loaded, and the answer is it depends on the sample size. So on one coin toss, it could be, there's no determining whether it's going to be heads or tails. We have no idea. Even over 5 or 10 coin tosses, who knows? Over 100 coin tosses, it matters a little bit less, but there could still, it might not be 50-50 exactly, but over tens of thousands or millions of coin tosses, it's highly predictable that the odds will be 50-50 or close to 50-50. So the larger the sample, the smaller the impact of randomness and luck. And poker follows a very similar pattern, just like investing. Over time, the better investor will exert its edge. Over time, the better poker player will exert their edge. So in the short term, luck dominates, but over time, skill manifests. And that's why anyone in poker can win in a single hand, just like anyone can make a single trade and have it go well. And most people in poker, frankly, they could book a winning session. So most people can go to the Bellagio, sit down for 2-3 hours. They could probably win. Some people could win for a month, but only a very, very small percentage, those with a true edge, can win long term. So instead of asking how much of poker is luck, what we should ask is how does the role of luck change over a given time? So I made this chart and you can see here, this is the relationship between skill and luck in poker. So the longer the time duration, the more decisions you make, the more hands you play, the more that skill edge will exert itself. And poker players call this variance. And variance basically measures the short-term ups and downs or the noise in your results caused by luck, even though you make the right decision. Now, variance exists because poker is a game of skill with an element of luck, but many things have variance. Investing has variance, of course, like we said, but so does sports, right? That's why it's called Any Given Sunday, because on any given Sunday, the worst football team could beat the best team. This is why sports teams, in fact, have 100-game seasons. In many sports like basketball, hockey, baseball, they play many, many games to determine who makes the playoffs, so that it's very likely that the better team is ranked make the playoffs, but they're also ranked in the appropriate order. And then when they get to the playoffs, they have best of 5 or best of 7 to decide the winner, because if they only played one game, anyone could win. Of course, in football, they do that because it's so physically grueling. You can't play 100 games of football. It's not physically possible. But in games where you can do that, that's what they do to better determine who's going to win, because there is luck. There is randomness. There is variance in these games. So that is why bad players win at poker, because it contains an element of luck. This is why an amateur could top a field of professionals and win a 7-figure prize. We've seen that happen in poker history before. And this is also why games like chess are not played for money, because chess has zero variance. The better player always wins. And so it's not a very fun game to wager money on. I wouldn't call it gambling. It's not very fun to risk money on chess, because if you're worse than someone, you're always going to lose. That's why the guys in Central Park and Washington Square Park clean up, because they sit down, they play the tour, so they win a lot of money. So the bigger picture is what poker can teach us about decision making, because I think many things in life operate under similar properties to a poker game. That is, many things in life are games of skill. Decision making is a game of skill, which is, what I'm really passionate about. And I think poker is something that teaches people how to make good decisions. It's a training ground for making decisions, because what you're really doing in poker is you're making a probabilistic bet in a game of incomplete information under time pressure where you have to make a decision. So in poker, every hand is like a decision that you can make in the real world. You don't have all the facts. You don't know what your opponent has. There is an element of luck. There are things you can't control, like which cards come. And you just have to decide, is this the right opportunity to wager money? And so you just do that over and over and over again. You get thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of reps in this training environment of making decisions that are profitable with incomplete information. And that's what you're doing with all the big decisions you make in life, whether you think about it or not. Like to make an investment in a startup, right? You don't call a venture capitalist who makes investments, you call it venture capital because they're investors. And frankly, most venture capitalists, they make 100 investments or 50 investments, and 48 of them will lose money. 1 or 2 of them will pay for the whole thing. So they have to manage their bankroll correctly, make a lot of probabilistic bets, knowing that most of the time they're going to lose. Most of those bets are going to lose, but 1 or 2 of them are going to 1000x and return the entire portfolio. That's basically how venture capital works. And so a lot of things in life work under the similar premise of making decisions with incomplete information. So
if you take a job in a new city, for example, you don't know exactly what that future is going to hold, how your boss is going to be, what opportunities they're going to be there, whether you're going to like it, who you're going to meet, and how it's all going to happen. As much as we feel like we want to control everything and know exactly what's going to happen in the future, the reality is there's more uncertainty than there is certainty in life and the real world. So every decision we make contains some element of risk, some element of unknown and uncertainty. And the best that we could do as decision makers or poker players or anyone making decisions without all the facts is synthesize the limited available information and make the best decision without all the facts. And it's a probabilistic bet. That's just the way it works. Sometimes we're wrong, sometimes we're right, but the best players or the best decision makers will eventually come out ahead because they're making so many decisions over the course of a lifetime. Eventually those good decisions are going to compound, and we call these people successful. So the real question is this: if poker and life and so many facets of life are games of incomplete information which are based on skill, but that contain elements of luck or uncertainty or the unknown, then it's not about whether or not poker is gambling. The real question is, why aren't more people learning to play? Because the truth is, in my opinion, from my experience playing poker for 20 years and coaching hundreds of people, poker's the ultimate training ground to prepare oneself for the real world. We'll discuss this more in future videos. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you like this, please share it with someone that you think would benefit. All these videos are free. That's why I do this, and they always will be. You could also follow along on here, subscribe to this channel, or social media at Alec Torelli. I'm on X and Instagram and wherever you are on social. So thanks for your attention. Hope you enjoyed this. See you in the next one.